others followed suit, ending personal friendships and working relationships. Most of those that continued to be friends with this individual eventually ended their friendships with me. Following this incident, I have found myself heavily scrutinizing the people that continue to spend time with those who I have cut off, and I have little respect for people to try and toe the middle line and not take sides. My question is, how far should people be held accountable for the actions of those people they choose to be friends with? If you are the company you keep, should those that stick by people who behave immorally be painted with the same brush, and how far does that extend to their relationships? That's from Sally.
Paint everyone with the same brush, Sally. There is only one brush. It is the all brush. Paint everyone, everything from all the time. It must come from the clouds. It must come down in the rain. It must be spread by lightning. Okay, never mind. So I could do that for a while, but I decided not to for, sanity's sake. Why did you cut off your friendship?
Well, so basically, I was sexually assaulted by somebody in my friendship group.
Sweet mother of God, what?
Yeah.
Did somebody not understand what the word friendship means?
Well, it was...
God.
We were very close for like a year, and then there were like a couple of like sort of consensual drunk after a night out, like hookups, and then...
Wait, hookups just means you had sex.
We didn't have sex.
Wait, isn't that what hookups mean? It's not fishing, is it?
No. It was just sort of like, oh, I'm a virgin. I didn't want to go.
Wait, is it snogging? Because nobody knows what that is. So, what does? Just tell me what does hookups mean in this situation?
So just like we went back to his just a lot of making out, touching.
Like genital touching? I'm not trying to pry. I'm just kind of curious. Yeah. Okay, so genital touching to orgasm?
Well, I think that was the intention.
So no.
No.
Okay, got it. So genital touching with no orgasm, and is that because the orgasm would interfere with the virginity, or I'm trying to figure out, or it's wrong, or?
It was just sort of, it got to a point, and then I was kind of like, I'm not really ready for this, and we stopped. It was just kind of like, I'm very, very inexperienced, and I kind of wanted to ease into the whole sexuality thing.
Right. You don't want to be like a cat with a cucumber. Right. Got it. Okay. Got it. And this happened a couple of times. Was the drunkenness, and I mean, how drunk were you? I guess let me just ask that question.
Pretty drunk. First time it was one of those kind of massive, huge piss ups. His memory was spotty, afterwards. Second time we were less drunk, but we'd still had quite a bit to drink. Third time, which is the time that wasn't consensual, he claims to remember none of it. I don't know if he's saying that or if that's genuine, because he does lose his memory from alcohol a lot.
So he's a blackout drunk?
Yes.
And you thought, you know what's great? Heavy petting with a blackout drunk and no witnesses.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming you, of course, but what he did was wrong. Absolutely wrong. But I'm a little bit more into prevention than cure.
Yeah. I mean, it's, in hindsight, yeah, there was a lot of warning, but I didn't think he was capable of that. Even though he was extremely drunk, he'd kind of be very aware of whether or not I was comfortable with what was happening.
But before he'd had a spotty memory, right?
Yeah.
So before, he said he didn't remember some of it, I assume, the next morning. I mean, people generally don't say they don't remember it while it's happening, but he didn't remember it the next morning as much, right? So you already had an indication that he had lost control while drinking. Not that he went crazy, but that he didn't remember or recall what he was doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Again,
Right.
I'm not entirely sure how much of that how
Oh, he
much
could
he
have been
was being
lying.
honest about that.
Yeah, no, he could have been lying.
Yeah.
I mean, drunk people do this all the time, right?
Yeah.
Which is they say, well, I don't really remember that, as a way of avoiding what they did
Mm.
when they were drunk, right?
Hmm.
Right. Did you want to be his girlfriend?
No.
What?
Um,
Okay,
it,
now I'm really, really confused. Okay. You didn't want to be his girlfriend, but you're heavy petting with him while you're both drunk.
yeah.
Why?
It was like, well, I found him very physically attractive, and it was just sort of like I literally no sexual experience before him, like not even like kissed a guy, and it was just kind of driven partly by curiosity, partly by like raw physical attractiveness.
It's not Bill Cosby, right? Just checking. Just making sure. So you found him physically attractive. You were in the same friendship group. You both like to drink. So why didn't you want to be his girlfriend? I'm not saying you should have. I'm just curious why.
Okay, I was kind of aware that he was very reliant on alcohol to sort of express his emotions. Like a lot of us in the group would use the phrase like emotionally constipated to describe him because he's just like he's got one of those faces where if you punched it, your hand would break. Like that's the kind of impression he gives off. Like, but when he gets drunk, he kind of opens up a little bit more, and I kind of was very conscious of that. And he's also a couple years younger than me, and it just it didn't seem like it would work out.
How much younger than you?
2 years.
Right. So it was lust.
Yeah.
So you didn't want to be his girlfriend, but you wanted to fool around while drunk.
Yeah.
What do you think of that now?
Not the wisest.
And you were absolutely shocked that a drunken teenager went too far?
Um, that third incident where it wasn't consensual, we'd we'd had like a bit of a not really a fight, like he'd said something kind of mean, like it was a party at his house, and it was one of those where I wasn't sure if he was joking or if he was just genuinely annoyed with me.
What did he say?
Uh, Something about he was talking about how he didn't like it when I sort of teased him about stupid stuff that he'd say while he was drunk that he didn't remember.
Sorry, say that again? I just couldn't quite follow.
So he was getting very angry at the fact that I kind of would tease him a little bit about just stupid things that he did when he was drunk, like that he didn't remember the next day. And he said that I was like ruining his uni life. And
Wait, were you saying this in front of other people?
I don't know, just when we would walk back home after like a night out or walk back home after classes.
Did you ever tell other people about things that he'd done while he was drunk?
Um, Sometimes I'd like bring it up in conversation, but it would be with the group who were there and kind of already
So,
knew,
yes.
and we just kind of laugh about it.
So, yes.
Yeah.
So, when he said that you were ruining his university experience, was that because his reputation was suffering because you were talking about what he did while he was drunk?
I don't think so, because I would never say anything to anybody who wasn't there and who didn't also like remember. Like he would get the most drunk out of the group. Everybody else would remember the night afterwards.
But he thought that you had said things that were harmful to his reputation. Is that right?
Possibly. I think he just doesn't like to be reminded about like embarrassing stuff.
Well, let's
but
not theorize. So maybe you told somebody who told somebody, and maybe he heard from somebody outside the group what he had done when drunk. Like,
I mean,
once
it's
you
a
tell people, it's out there, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like topless selfies. You know, like once they're out, once they've escaped, they're out there forever, right? So once you tell these stories, again, not blaming you, I'm just trying to follow this, right? But once you tell these stories, they're going to spread, right? Especially if it's a good-looking guy. And one of the ways in which they're going to spread is men might spread them because they're in competition with this good-looking guy, so they want to downgrade his sexual market value so that they can compete, right?
Okay.
So if he got the reputation as a sloppy drunk or a dangerous drunk or a sentimental drunk or whatever, right? Then that is not great, right?
No.
No, he shouldn't be drinking that much, don't get me wrong, but so he thought that you were ruining his university experience by talking about what he did when he was drunk, right?
Yeah.
And he expressed anger about this, right?
Yeah.
And what did you do?
So I was quite upset. I went over to him and I said, like, because it was sort of, he was going on a rant and I wasn't sure if he was saying it because he was trying to be funny or trying to be the center of attention or if he genuinely meant it. So I went over and I said, like, hey, did you really mean that stuff that you said? And he just kind of got up and moved across the room and sat somewhere else. And then one of the girls who was at the party just goes, why don't we change the subject? Let's go around the room and say what we like about each other. So everybody could tell that there was a bit of awkward tension.
So this was at the meeting of the friendship group?
Yeah, it was like.
Oh no, it was a party at his house, you said.
It was like a house party, like, but more kind of casual drinking, sitting around chatting kind of thing.
So was it just for this friendship group or was it a more general invite?
It was mostly the friendship group. There were a couple of other people who we didn't see quite as often.
And what is a friendship group?
So basically we all know each other through dance. Like we run a dance society at the university.
I'm just overdosing on Britishness here, but all right. All right. Darts and warm beer. All right. So,
Yeah.
Danny boy. All right. So then what happened? So people tried to wallpaper over this social awkwardness, and then what happened?
Yeah. So the conversation moved on. It got late. People started to leave. I kind of hung back because I wanted to talk to him about it a little bit more. And at this point, I was very, very drunk. It probably wouldn't have been safe for me to walk home by myself. And
why not?
Everybody else had left.
I don't know what that means.
Like, when you're kind of a level of drunk, you need somebody to make sure you don't trip over your own feet, basically.
So you were really drunk?
I was incredibly drunk, yes.
And why do you drink so much?
Well, I don't anymore. At the time, it was just, I think it was mostly peer influence. Like everybody was getting that level of drunk. And if you're the only sober person in the room, you're just kind of
bored.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, drunk people are, if you're not drunk, they are the most boring people on the planet.
Yeah.
All right, so you were heading home?
So I hung back at his house after everyone had left.
Oh, to talk to him while you were drunk and he was drunk about a conflict, because that's just going to go well. All right, go on.
Yeah. I mean, in the past, we'd had arguments and he'd say, we're not drunk enough to have this conversation. You need to get drunker. And like, he really could not have.
Well, that's fairly frank.
An adult conversation while sober. So I hung back. His housemate came in after a night out and he was talking to her about it. And so I was just like, I'm just going to go wait upstairs. So I went upstairs. A few minutes later, he came up. I tried to talk to him about it. He just kind of.
I'm sorry. Why did you head upstairs?
Oh, because I was like too drunk to walk home at this point. He'd said that I could sleep over.
Sorry, the roommate.
Oh no,
the man himself.
Yeah.
Okay, the man that you'd had the heavy petting with before.
Yeah.
He said you can sleep over.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you went
I
upstairs
didn't.
to a bedroom?
Yeah.
Right. And then?
And so he came up. Uh, I tried to open up the conversation again. He just sort of got into bed, said, "No,
Wait,
I'm
what
too
do you mean he
tired."
got into bed?
I'm like sitting on the floor. He walks past me, gets into his bed.
You're sitting on the floor. He gets into his bed.
Yeah.
All right.
Um. And
And your
yeah, he said,
friends just thought, we'll leave her here drunk.
yeah. I mean, I'd stayed over at his before after nights out when we'd been
Yes, but
drinking
you'd
and
also
getting
had the
drunk.
heavy petting thing, right?
Yeah,
Did your friends know about that?
they did.
How did they know about that?
Um, I told
Huh.
one close friend, and then she told a few others, and he told a group of his friends who, and it just kind of got around. He was kind of
Why
bragging
are you
about it.
telling people about your sexual life?
Like it was, it was kind of like a just first experience. Like you kind of want to talk it over with your girlfriends. I kind of thought that was sort of normal.
Well, and did you ask them not to talk about it with others?
I did, and she was just like, "Oh, I really want to tell this guy. I want to tell him so badly." And yeah, and I guess she
Why
just
does she
sort of
want
did.
to tell some guy about your sexual experience?
I guess everybody in the group thought it was kind of funny.
Funny.
Yeah, just two people in the friendship group hooked up. Like they found it funny.
I'm not sure what you mean by funny.
I don't know. They just talk about the fact that it happened and laugh about it.
Anyway, all right.
Yeah.
I'll just call myself over 50. All right. So then you're on the floor, he goes to bed, and then what?
So I like lie down to sleep on the floor, and he goes, "You can get into the bed." And I was just like, "You sure?" He was just like, "Yeah, no, it's fine." So I kind of like got into his bed, sort of curled up at the edge, and then he sort of started touching me. He like pulled me around to face him, and then he climbed on top of me. And I don't want to go too much into graphics, but I was struggling. I had tears in my eyes. It was not a good experience at all.
That's horrible. The whole situation is horrible. Horrible. Did he eventually take no for an answer?
Eventually, it kind of gets to a point where you just sort of you struggle initially, and then you just sort of go limp.
What do you mean you
And
go limp? Don't you
like
kick him in the balls or something? I mean, I don't quite understand. If you don't want to have sex
you're
and the guy's all over you, don't you just hit him with the lamp? I mean, I'm not sure I follow.
it's because like if you're struggling initially and you're being overpowered, like the next instinct is to just sort of relax because it's painful and you don't
So what's painful?
like he put I don't want to be too
Oh, he
graphic, but
penetrated.
just with his fingers, but it hurt.
God, Sally, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
But what? But when? I mean, sorry. I mean, maybe I'm missing something here, but don't you fight tooth and nail? Like, I mean, maybe you were too drunk, or I mean,
I've talked to a few people about it, and apparently it's a common thing to just go like if struggling doesn't work, you just go limp.
oh,
And
struggling works if you keep struggling. Struggling works if you escalate until you're free, or he's dead, or both.
I mean, he's a lot physically stronger than I am.
Well, he's got eyes, doesn't he? You know what eyes
Yeah.
are? Pretty damn soft. He's
True.
got balls. Pretty damn sensitive. He's drunk. So very slow reaction times.
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to get, and I'm not saying you're suggesting this, I don't want to get anyone to get out of this conversation, just go limp. I'm
Yeah,
like, you've
no.
got teeth, haven't you? I'm serious. Go Mike Tyson on his gropey ass.
Yeah, I like thinking about it like rationally now, I feel like I should have been able to defend myself a bit better, but when you're in that situation, you don't really know what to do, and it's sort of this is somebody who you trusted and they're doing this and you don't know why, and yeah.
I mean, it's just weird to me that after 70 years of feminism, there's still such a go limp instinct.
I think it's more of a like almost like a biological defense mechanism, like because if you are being penetrated and you're struggling, then there's risk of like internal injury.
No, I get that. I mean, but prior to that, like the moment the man doesn't say no, you escalate like crazy until he gets off you. Before he, he's got to open your pants, he's got to whatever, right?
Yeah. I was like, I grabbed his arms and I was trying to like move his hands away from me, and
But just bite his arm.
I mean, his arm wasn't anywhere near my face.
Are you saying it was impossible to get your face near the body of the man who was attacking you in this way? Come on.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I get it.
I'm just saying this for others.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
escalate until you're not being bothered that way anymore. And the
Yeah.
man is in a vulnerable position. Yeah, he's bigger. Yeah, he's stronger, but he's in a vulnerable position, right? He's got to unbuckle his pants. He's got to unbuckle your pants or whatever it is. There's time. You got an elbow, or just throw him, push him, headbutt him. Like if you take your forehead and you bash it into his nose, I got a feeling the blood is going to go away from his penis and out of his nose, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Poke the damn guy in the eye, thumb his eye.
I guess, like, at the time, and I think this might have something to do with the alcohol or just trying to rationalize it. My initial thought was that he didn't realize I didn't want this to happen. So it was just trying to, like,
Well, you did get into bed with him after you'd done a bunch of heavy petting in the past.
yeah, yeah. But, like, obviously, like, thinking back, I'm pretty confident that that isn't the case, because every other time it had been very, very different. And he'd been very careful to make sure that, I was comfortable with everything that was happening, and that just didn't happen this time.
Why did
so.
you get into the bed? Again, I'm not blaming you. I'm just trying to figure out the dominant, like the causality here, right?
I mean, I didn't really think anything of it. Like, I know it happened in the past, but I'd also slept over at his in the past and nothing had happened.
But the previous 2 times you'd slept over, the petting had occurred?
Yes.
So the previous 2 times you got into bed with him, there'd been heavy petting, but this time you got into bed with him, and was it immediately repulsive? Or was it something that grew, or what?
Moment he started to, like, even started to put his hands on me, I kind of curled up into a ball and, like, sort of went tense, and I thought that would be, like, enough of an indication that he'd be like, okay, she doesn't want to. And I thought that he wouldn't do anything that I didn't want him to.
Sure. No, I mean, and he shouldn't, of course, right? But
Yeah.
getting to bed with a man that you previously have had a sexual relationship with every time you got into his bed the last 2 times, it's a little bit playing with fire. Again, not to blame you. He's wrong for what he did, no question.
Mm.
But it's better not to be in these situations to begin with, right?
Yeah. Of course.
Then did he stop after a while?
Eventually, yeah, he basically climbed on top of me and put his dick in my mouth. And I like recoiled, and I just went, just get off me. And he was just like, okay. And yeah.
Well, there you're in a bit of a position of power now, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, so you said something like, I guess it was a lot of vowels, but you said, get off me.
Yeah.
And then he did.
Yeah.
And then what?
He just kind of rolled over and went to sleep.
And you?
I just was just sort of lying there trying to process it. And it was like early hours of the morning. I got up and I just like burst into tears.
In the room with
And
him?
yeah, still in the room.
And did he wake up?
Yeah, he asked me if I was okay. And I didn't answer. I just kept crying, and then he just sort of he didn't say anything else. I assume he went back to sleep.
And did you say clearly no to him, or did you sort of do this curl in the ball, or?
I said don't at one point, but once he'd put his fingers in me, it was very painful, and it probably came out a bit like sort of speaking through my teeth kind of thing.
So he may not have heard it, or it may have been like he was doing something and you said don't, and he may have thought, oh, she doesn't want me to do this thing, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Or he may not have heard it if it was through your teeth or whatever it was, right?
Yeah. But I was like really resisting, and like as much
well, no,
as
you
I
went
could.
limp, didn't you? Oh, before you went limp.
Before I went limp, yeah.
Right. Wow. So then he went back to sleep after he asked you if you were okay and you were crying? What did you say? Did you reply to him, or?
I didn't.
Right.
And then I think I just told him that I was going home, and I collected my stuff and I went over to a friend's house like immediately.
Right. So then you were able to walk at that time of night, right? Because I thought the idea was like you were too drunk to go anywhere, but then you did go somewhere, right? So you could have before, theoretically, right? If it was strong enough of a motivation.
I felt like I don't know how long I was there, but I felt like I'd sobered up significantly. And I think just the intense amounts of stress and.
Oh, yeah, the cortisol and yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So you went to your friend's place.
Yeah.
And what then?
So I showed up at her door. I had like tears streaming down my face. I was an absolute mess. She invited me in. First thing she asked me when she opened the door was, "Did you sleep with him?" And I just kind of went, kind of, but I didn't want to. And then I never used the term sexual assault or rape, but I did say several times that it wasn't consensual. I had trouble. I had a long period of time where I felt very uncomfortable calling it by its name because I just was in denial about what had happened. And I told her everything, and she said, oh, you guys are so close, you'll be able to move past this, and kind of encouraged me not to make a big thing out of it.
Huh. Why do you think she did that?
She's one of those very conflict-averse people. Like, I think she will just kind of go with whatever's easiest for her. And if I kicked up a fuss about this, it would have caused a lot of tension within the group. And eventually, when I did go to the police, that's kind of divided people a lot. And people have been called in to give witness statements, everybody who was at the party, and it's just been very stressful for everyone. So right. I think she just sort of went for the least stress for her option.
And what was the steps that led you to go to the police?
So I saw him a couple of days later, and he actually asked me why I was crying in the morning when I left his house. And I just sort of had this moment of, oh God, you really don't remember. And I told him that what had happened, like, I didn't want it to happen. and he seemed kind of horrified, and he was like just a bit panicked, and saying like I wouldn't ever do anything like that on purpose, and really kind of apologetic. And I took that, but as time went on, he started be like, mostly when he was drunk, he'd be very friendly towards me when sober most of the time. But then when drunk, he would get very aggressive or very standoffish, and he'd it was just like really stupid stuff. He'd like act as though I was disgusting to him. Like if I accidentally brushed past him, he'd like move away and be like, ugh, and that kind of thing. And then it started to like really get to me more and more. And I said, like, we really need to have like sit down and talk about this properly. I text this to him, and he texts me back saying, you consented, I did nothing wrong. And then I sort of lost, like, I kind of thought to myself, if he doesn't think what he's done is wrong, he might do it to someone else. And I don't really want that on my conscience if I didn't do anything to try and stop that.
Well, it's on text, right? I mean, if he admits to what he did in text form, you can go straight to the cops, right? So
yeah.
It's, I'm not agreeing with it, but I can understand his reticence.
I mean, I asked to meet up and speak in person.
Yeah, but, you could be recording.
I suppose.
The moment that he admits what he did, then it's kind of open and shut, right?
Mm.
So that, I mean, again, I'm not justifying it, but I can sort of understand his avoidance of admitting guilt, right?
Yeah.
And also when he's drunk, he kind of avoids you. Well, I would imagine that's because the problems occurred or his behavior occurred when he was drunk and with you. So when he's drunk, to avoid you may have something to do with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what happened?
So this is all very recent. The police report is still ongoing.
No, but when did you decide to go to the police, and what happened there? And how long was it since the incident that you went?
It was about 6 months after the incident that I eventually went to the police.
6 months. Wow.
Yeah. It was just kind of like eating away at me for the whole time, and I was trying to blame it on other things and just trying to avoid thinking about it. But then once I sort of confronted it and went to the police about it, it was sort of a bit of a weight off my shoulders.
Right. But of course, I mean, if he had done physical damage to you with this physical invasiveness, there would be no particular indication, I would assume, at that late point after the attack, right?
Yeah, they said that they wouldn't bother doing a forensic analysis or any kind of a kit because it's too long after the incident.
Right. Do you think there's anything that he could have done that would have prevented you from going to the police?
I think if he had agreed to talk to me about it and we'd had an honest conversation about what had happened, I might not have, because I didn't want to go to the police about it because I did still consider him as a friend. I know that sounds insane.
What now?
Yeah. I mean,
you went to the police to destroy the life of a friend? I mean, a person you considered a friend, and don't get me wrong, I mean, maybe it's the right thing to do, but he was in the friend category?
I mean, we'd had a very close friendship for a year before it happened, and I didn't really want to let go of that. And if I could sort of, I guess, get closure about what had happened without having to go to the police and without having to destroy his life, I would have preferred that at the time, at least. But I was just too scared that he might repeat what he had done and do the same to someone else.
Hang on, but sorry, I'm just trying to follow this, Sally. And again, I'm not blaming you, but you want to stay friends with a man that you're afraid is going to sexually assault another woman. Sorry.
If from the conversation I left confident that he wouldn't repeat the same mistake, then I might not have gone to the police. I don't know whether or not that would have been the right decision or not now. But at the moment, I feel like I made the right decision.
And how long ago was it that you went to the police?
So it would have been towards the end of March.
Right. Right. And what's happened since?
So they've started conducting their investigation. They're interviewing everybody who was there the night it happened, just to ask them about the general tone and vibe, and speaking to my friend.
Nobody witnessed. Sorry to interrupt, but nobody witnessed what happened, of course, right?
No, but just the events leading up to when people would have been there. They're being interviewed about that, and also first disclosure. So the first person I told, they're asking her to relay exactly what I said and how much she can remember of that.
Right.
Yeah, and I've been told that we weren't to be in contact. He was given a warning to stay away from me, and I was told not to contact him, which I haven't done.
Is he out of uni?
He's at uni still.
Oh, so he hasn't been kicked out, right?
Yeah, I've made them aware, but they said since there's an ongoing police report, they can't really do anything until that's been concluded.
And what is he facing? Do you know? What is he? What might happen to him? Are we talking jail time? What's going to happen?
They haven't given me any indication of if the report will go any further. They said that once they've interviewed everyone, they'll start compiling evidence, and then they'll give me an idea of whether or not any charges can be made, if it will be like a curfew or a fine or go to court and possibly consider jail time. Because it was so long ago and it's very much like he said, she said. There isn't a great likelihood that anything's going to happen. But I'm hoping that having to go through the report will at least kind of scare him into not doing this kind of thing again. Because if somebody else reports and says his name, then that's an even bigger weight.
Sorry, can you just... I was just having a look. I apologize for this, Sally. I was just looking. I was just curious what the punishment might be in the UK for sexual assault. And you were saying that, not necessarily jail time, but if there's something negative that accrues to him socially, that might keep him from repeating. Is that what you meant?
So I'm hoping that the fact that the report has happened would kind of like scare him into not repeating this, because if somebody else reports him, then there's a higher likelihood that something will get done. So if he's not charged this time round, they'll keep it on record that he was accused. And then if somebody else accuses him, they'll be all like, well, this isn't the first time your name's come up, kind of thing.
Right, right. And what's happened to the increasingly horribly named friendship group?
So I was quite, I think understandably, very traumatized by what had happened, and I was severely depressed and I was self-harming, and it was just having a really awful time. And a couple of them told me that they didn't want to spend time with me anymore because it was distracting them from their studies, and that it was just too stressful for them to be around.
Police investigation?
The police investigation.
Was distracting them from their studies, or what?
Just general being around me when I was depressed.
Right, okay.
And one of the members of this dance group we run it together. Like we're co-presidents of the like society. He was criticizing my like ability to do my job because of my mental health, and he'd bring up the fact he didn't know what happened, but he was all like, "You're not working with this guy, and that's because you're like mentally ill and you're incapable of being rational and objective," and just making all these comments about my mental health. And
Did
that
he
was all via
know
text.
the experience that you were talking about?
He didn't.
He didn't. Okay.
He
Okay.
didn't know that
He just
happened.
didn't know why you were upset. Okay.
He didn't know why I was depressed, and I'd had depression in the past, and it had never affected my work. Like, I think he was just kind of being kind of a dick. Like,
And
he had
sorry, go ahead.
he had his way that he liked to run it, and I had my way, which I like to run it. We really shouldn't have been running it like as a joint thing. We just weren't incompatible. We were just getting incompatible in our working styles. So once he had something that he could jump on, like, oh, she's got a mental health issue, like I can use this to say that she's incapable and try and get others to listen to her less, kind of that kind of thing.
And you said you'd had depression in the past?
Yes.
Since what age?
17.
And your childhood?
Like not the best relationship with my parents growing up. My dad would hit us, and my mom would threaten to leave, and my brother was diagnosed with depression when I was 17 as well.
And neglect, you mentioned on your adverse childhood experience score.
Sorry, you cut out for a
Neglect.
second.
You were saying neglect.
Neglect. Yeah, so whenever my mom would go away, like if she like went away for a weekend or stayed over at her mom's for a bit and she'd leave my dad in charge, he just wouldn't prepare food for us. And like my mom would come back and we'd be like, well, we haven't eaten. And she'd scream at my dad and say like, why didn't you feed them? And we'd ask our dad to feed us and he'd be on the computer and he'd say, I'll do it later, and then never did.
And you had a household member depressed. Was that your brother, or mentally ill, or suicide attempt?
My brother was diagnosed with depression.
Right. And how did that manifest before he was diagnosed?
He was very reclusive. Like he'd just stay in his room for most of the time, and if you tried to go in and talk to him, he'd usually just get angry and tell you to leave.
And do you know what brought that on in him?
He doesn't really like to talk about it. Everybody would just kind of say that he was a bit of a hermit and that he was addicted to video games and just sort of brushed it off and laughed about it.
Right. And did the physical abuse more come from your father and the verbal abuse from your mom?
Yes.
And tell me a little bit more about the dance group, if you don't mind.
So it's a university group. I joined a couple years ago, and I ran it 1 year alongside another person, another year by myself with not very much help. And then this year, with this bigger group, there were 6 of us in the group.
Right.
So all kind of like varying backgrounds, varying age groups, mostly between like, he was the youngest, he was 19, and the eldest was 25.
Right.
And we just meet up and like train together every week, and we'd set up events and run classes and workshops and that kind of thing. It was a nice little group before this year.
Right, right.
Like there was a really tight sense of community.
What type of dance was it?
Breakdance.
Ah, okay, cool. Cool. And did you guys put on shows?
Um, this year became very show heavy. Uh, in the past, it would be like a couple of shows every year. It's mostly like battles and competitions and stuff.
Right, right, okay. And you said that you were self-harming
Yeah,
after this attack. And
yeah.
had you done that before?
Yes, when I was 17 as well, and then again when I was 19.
And what sort of self-harm was it?
So basically, I had a friend in school, like that I met while I was in school, who would cut with scissors, and I looked up online like methods to stop, and it would have things like hold an ice cube in your hand until it melts, and like snap rubber bands against your wrist. And I sort of started with the least severe one and then worked my way up to cutting.
Wait, so you were trying to find a cure for a friend of yours?
Yeah, and then that was like years before I did it.
Right.
But I knew of all of the methods when you felt that way to avoid it. So I started with the least severe ones and then I worked my way up.
What did you end up? Was it like thighs or
Left forearm.
left forearm? Like on the inside, the soft, like the under part?
Both inside and outside, like all the way around.
And what would you cut with?
So it started off with fabric scissors, then double-edged razors, and the most recent one was a pencil sharpener.
A pencil sharpener. Oh.
Yeah, you can unscrew the blade and
Yeah. And what was the? Were there any particular states of mind or incidents or occurrences that would trigger this? Was it more in terms of time of the week, or were there triggers for it?
So a lot of it was I just kind of be in my own head thinking about everything that had happened and like how horrible the situation was. And it's like I'd cut and then I'd stop thinking about all the stuff I was thinking about and think about, okay, I'm bleeding now. I need to wash this. I need to look after this. So it was sort of a distraction.
And what was your relationship to I assume it hurt, I assume it hurt.
I mean, the adrenaline kind of cancels out a lot of the pain. So it won't hurt initially when you do it, but then it will start to sting a few minutes later. Right.
And what would you be thinking about? I assume your childhood, is that fair to say? Is that what you would be thinking about before you were cut?
It was more often like the immediate situation and like kind of because I'd had depression on and off when I was a teenager. There was this sort of and I'd gotten over it and then been depressed again. It was sort of like, this is just what life is like. Like there's no other side. It's just up and down, and it's never gonna improve significantly.
Yeah, depression feels eternal in the moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's a lot more than a moment, right?
Yeah.
And how long did your depression last when you had it at 17 and 19?
I'm not too sure exactly when I was 17. I was doing my final exams at school, and I was in the mentality of once I leave home, things will get better. I'll be living on my own. So it was all through the school year, and then when it got to summer, it was just kind of like a sense of relief, like I'm not going to have to live at home anymore, and I started to get better.
Right.
Then when I was 19, it was the better part of a year, and I had a a lot of like counseling, CBT, all of that stuff to get over it. And then I did start to feel better. And then this kind of triggered it off again.
And does the dancing or other forms of exercise, does that help?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what made it hardest this time because the dancing had been a real like de-stress for me. And then that environment became very stressful because of the people that were there.
Right. Right. And what's the status of the people you were friends with before now? I know that you've said that there's fragmentation, and where do people sit with this whole, well, with all of this stuff?
I think, well, most of them don't speak to me anymore. Um, I think a lot of them, particularly the ones like the original like six of us who are running this group, um, a lot of them either think I'm making it up or they don't really want to think too hard about it. And they don't want to believe that he's capable of that. And I'm kind of out of sight, out of mind. So they just kind of continue to be friends with him and just continue as they were.
No, it's tough. That is very tough. I'm sorry to hear that. It's hard, when you are expecting support from friends and they cross over to what you see as the dark side. That is a hard thing, right?
Yeah.
And what would you say to, there's no way to make this a good thing. Obviously, what happened to you was awful and terrible and wrong. But what would you say to other women, or maybe even perhaps men, about what they could do to prevent such a thing from coming into being?
Geez, like, because I know what the warning signs were in my particular situation, and I ignored them.
Well,
So,
what were they for people who may be in a similar situation?
um, I don't know. That's hard. I don't know if there's any kind of blanket piece of advice that would like help everyone.
No, but even if you can help a few people.
Um, I guess the big one is don't ignore the red flags when you see them. And I made a lot of allowances for this guy's behavior because of his age and the fact that he was the youngest in the group. And it was just kind of like, oh, he's immature, he'll grow out of it. And that's never an excuse
But what were the
for
red
any.
flags?
Um,
But this does nothing to excuse what happened to you, just so you understand. I mean,
yeah, of course.
but what were the red flags that you see?
The fact that he was so heavily reliant on alcohol and that he would get blackout drunk and he would on occasion become more aggressive when he was drunk. And he would blame a lot of his negative behavior on the fact that he was drunk and think that that was enough of an excuse.
Yeah, like earlier we were talking about the woman who had the doctor's note. Now we have the alcohol note.
Yeah. He even said to me at one point when he'd said I don't remember what he said, but he'd said something nasty directed at me. And then I told him about it the next day. And he said, you can't hold me accountable for the things I do when I'm drunk.
Oh, you can't hold me accountable for the things that I do when I'm drunk. Yeah, that could be considered a red flag, right?
Yeah.
People are horrifyingly honest in hindsight sometimes, right?
Yeah.
What he means by that is I don't hold myself responsible for what I do when I'm drunk. In other words, I have license for anything when I'm drunk.
Yeah.
Was there anything else?
Uh,
The alcohol reliance, the lack of emotional expressivity, as you said. What was it? Emotionally constipated? I think that was the phrase that you
yeah,
used. The
yeah,
the sense of anything goes when you're drunk. And you said the aggression. Now, the aggression was just verbal prior to this
yeah,
assault, right?
yeah,
Right. But was there and indicates that somebody has a problem with his temper, right?
yeah.
And
He
so if somebody has a
definitely,
problem with his temper, has said, I give myself license to do whatever when I'm drunk, and is angry at you in
yeah,
that evening and invites you into his bed, again, none of this justifies anything, but there are ways in which these things can be avoided to some degree, right?
yeah, definitely.
And was there anything else?
He was just very insecure and just like lacking in confidence, and he kind of hide behind this like ego. Like he was like he's an incredible dancer, and he's good looking, he's got a lot of muscle, and he's kind of sort of has this like persona that he fronts a lot basically.
And for those who don't know that Britishism, what do you mean? He fronts a lot. Like he has
Like
this cool exterior that doesn't match his inner self.
yeah,
It's not quite poser, but I know what you mean. It's a false
yeah,
self. Yeah.
yeah. I did have the conversation about like hitting your kids with him at one point as well. And he was hit. Like I knew this. He's from an area of London where it's kind of the norm. Like it's very, very rare to meet somebody who hasn't been hit by their parents in that area. So I kind of knew this going in. But he had been, and he was all like, I thank my parents for it every day. I
Oh
was
my
like a
gosh.
bad kid. I would have turned so fucked up if I hadn't been hit. And
So he's justifying the violence he was subjected to as a child, praising it, in fact.
yeah,
So
yeah,
his relationship to aggression is kind of messed up, right?
yeah. And it is something that you hear so often in in the area where I grew up.
Did he have a father in the house?
Yes.
Do you know what his relationship was like with his father?
I mean, he, he didn't say that much about it. He like only really talks about them in terms of like they give me money and like just sort of that teenage like they're kind of annoying but I love them kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've certainly known some dancers who've had some tough stuff as children.
It's really common in like just the breakdance scene.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Very common.
Yeah. I mean, there's the hip hop culture influence as well, which is also can come from a rough place.
Yeah.
And how are you enjoying university? I mean, it's like that old joke, like, and I'm sorry to make it any kind of joke, but it's like this old joke. Other than that, how did you enjoy the play, Mrs. Lincoln, right? Because President Lincoln got shot at a play by John Wilkes Booth. But prior to this situation, how was university for you? Did you find it good, enjoyable, rewarding, rich? Was it what you wanted?
Yeah, I was enjoying it.
I'm sorry, you were?
I was enjoying it a lot, yeah.
Right. And what are you taking?
Classics.
English lit?
No, like ancient Greek and Roman history.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then what is your hope for graduation and the future for that?
So I want to do a master's next year in business and marketing, and I want to set up my own company running events. I want to kind of start with what I know, which is dance events, and kind of bring these to like more deprived areas, like set up local talent shows, that kind of thing.
I'm doing the math. You seem to have raced through pretty quickly. Am I right? Did you SWAT? People don't. It's not related to snogging.
Like
it just means studying hard. But go on.
I've got like a plan, like a vague plan in my head. Like I have a mentor who's like a professional dancer, and he runs events, and he's helped me run successful events in the past, and that's what I really love doing.
Right. And do you want to get married, have kids, do you think?
Yeah.
Right. All right. I mean, I have a couple of comments, but I don't want to, if there's something else you wanted to mention, I'm certainly happy to hear.
Like going back to the
I know this is a lot of backstory for your question. I just want to make sure we didn't lose it in the shuffle.
It's the people who have sort of cut me off and are just continuing to spend time with him and don't seem to worry about the accusation. Like, those people kind of scare me, and the people who continue to spend time with them, knowing that that's the company they keep, that also kind of scares me. Two of the people in this group in particular, they had a conversation where they sat down. It was two of them and pretty much the only person within the society who has cut this guy off after hearing what I had to say, and who's kind of stuck by me. They said that they sat down and they said, if we, like, me is severely depressed, like, if we cut her off at this point, she might kill herself. And we need to not feel guilty about that if that happens. And
it's pretty cold.
Yeah, and my friend who's the one who's still my friend, he doesn't seem to think so. He doesn't seem to have much of a problem with that thinking.
That they shouldn't feel guilty if you kill yourself?
Yeah, like knowing that them cutting all contact would have maybe been the thing that pushed me over the edge.
And did you feel anywhere close to the edge?
I was at the time, definitely.
Which time?
Around the time when they had this conversation and when they did cut me off. And
how long after the incident was that? Sorry to refer to it as the incident. I'm running out of descriptors, but
it was a good few months, maybe like 4 months afterwards.
Was this still a time where you were trying to work on a friendship with him and...
I wasn't spending as much time with him as I had in the past, but I was kind of trying to sort of be civil and get on with him.
Right.
And we were both running this group, and there was almost like a professional, I need to be able to work with him element to it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's not funny, but, you are getting an education. And I'm sorry that this is the education that you're getting, but you're getting an education on people.
Yeah.
And it's not fun. I mean, I won't go into sort of my experience with this kind of stuff because I don't want to trivialize what happened to you, and nothing happened to me in this kind of way. But it is really an education when you ask people to trust you, when you ask them to take a side against a bad guy or a bad girl, and you realize just how insubstantial people are, how scared or conformist, or, as you said about your friend, didn't want to cause any trouble, and how little people are guided by any form of objective integrity. how morally flaccid, how spineless, how empty people are. Sorry to startle you, but it's a very powerful thing. And I went through I went through it in the business world, I went through it in the personal world, where it's just like bad stuff is happening and everyone just kind of does that Homer Simpson back into the hedge thing, you know? I'll come out when mommy and daddy have stopped fighting, you know? And it is really quite something. And, you know, I mean, I've been publicly attacked many times and a lot of people, whoosh, vanish. They ghost, baby. Call me when everything's done and the smoke is clear. I'll be here with you after the battle to claim I helped in the victory, right? I mean, it is appalling that people who are close to you, I mean, I had cancer and a whole bunch of people, I thought they were friends. Never called. When you have to take a stand in your life or when something's happening in your life which requires support from people, well, you find out who they are, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of chilling. You rip the lid or the mask off the friendship group. And it's neither friendly nor much of a group, right? Now, I will say this. Don't have sexual relations outside of a committed relationship. I'm just going to be really annoying and just lecture the shit out of this.
Yeah, no, I have.
I don't need to tell you. I don't need to tell you, right? You understand now why sexual morality was kind of important before the boomers detonated it in the name of hedonism, right? In the dark decade of the 70s that I will do an entire podcast on at some point. But don't have sexual relations outside of a loving, committed relationship. I'm not saying you got to be a nun till you're married. Not that I would disapprove, but I'm just saying don't do it. Don't have sexual relations with somebody you don't at least really, really, really like. Really like. Love, ideally, yes. Yes, it's called make love, not make like, right? But this guy was praising the people who abused him as a child. He was it's certainly a social alcoholic, right? I mean, I assume that most times that he got together with people socially, particularly in the evening, got to have a drink, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the guy's at least a social alcoholic. Maybe he's a full-blown alcoholic. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know that his closest friend just sits alone in his room and gets drunk every night, like, and it's like a normal thing. Everybody's just kind of like, he's like, oh, I'm sophisticated, I'm a whiskey drinker, like.
Oh, yeah, because whiskey is just classy.
Yeah.
I got one of the higher-end STDs, don't you know? But, no, there's another red flag, right? That he's best friends with a complete alcoholic, right? Guy can't seem to function without alcohol, drinks every day, probably to drunkenness, right? So you are a victim without a doubt, but you made mistakes.
Yeah, of course.
Right? I mean, was it lust? This guy's just hot, even though he's clearly signaling that he's not a very good guy. He gets drunk, he gets belligerent, he praises his abusers, he, can't function without alcohol in social situations, he's verbally mean towards you. And these are all, prevention is the better part. I mean, nobody can go back and change what happened. The whole point is to try and extract some wisdom from these things for you. You learned the lesson in a very bitter and horrible way, but there are other people, women in particular, who can learn from this horrible situation and try and find ways to avoid this. And again, I know I'm repeating this, but I really, really want you to understand you're still a victim. Don't get me wrong. You're completely a victim. But this is why lust is considered a deadly sin, right?
Yeah.
Well, one of the 7 deadly sins. So.
I mean, like.
No, go ahead.
But before all this happened, like, again, we were extremely close and I did very much care about him and...
No. No.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I hate to correct the victim, but you were not close. No, because if you think that
Yeah.
someone you're close with can do this to you, you'll never feel close to anyone. You weren't close to him. He was a sloppy emotional drunk, and that's pretend intimacy.
Mm.
But you weren't close to him. You didn't admire him. You didn't respect him. You didn't look up to the virtues that he manifested. You didn't respect his friends. You didn't respect his family. You didn't respect the honor and integrity and goodness of his nature. You didn't admire his moral courage. There was a sloppy pseudo-intimacy when you were both bombed. That is not the same as being close to someone. And I want to get this across to you, Sally, because one day you will actually be close to someone. And I don't want you to think that if you're close to someone, they can actually do something like this to you. Because then you'll never feel safe and secure. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's messed up. He's messed up, and therefore he can't be close to you. He's got this, what did you call it, fronting?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a big false self. He's put himself into muscles and dance rather than virtue and self-knowledge. He's drinks too much, and he assaulted you. You were not close to him, in my humble opinion. Because when someone is close to you, that will never, ever, ever happen. They would rather hurt themselves than hurt you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You will feel safe, but I don't want you to conflate what happened to you with being close to someone.
Yeah. One of the things that kind of really bothers me about the whole, like, people continuing to spend time with him and people continuing to spend time with people who know what he did and continue to spend time with him is like, most of them know that it does really hurt me, the fact that this doesn't seem to bother them and that they're continuing to keep company with him, like, after what I've told them. And I've been accused of being a bit demanding and saying, you're not allowed to dictate who we spend time with, and
You bully.
yeah, it's like you can't ask us not to hang out with him and not to be friends with him and not
Sure
to
you
train with
can.
him.
You can ask anything you want. Sally, you can ask me to play a ukulele while doing the Macarena. You can ask anything you want. No, seriously. You gotta, I don't understand. You can't expect me. You can't. I can. Now, just because I ask someone to do something or have an expectation doesn't mean that they have to comply. But I sure as hell can ask anyone anything. And they can ask me whatever they want to. But this, I gotta control you. You can't ask me this. Like, I can, and I just have. Deal with it. Right? But this censoring of others because you can't handle what they're asking is really pitiful. It's pathetic. Pathetic, as the British would say, right? Yeah, it's pathetic. Right? But no, you can ask them. Of course you have the right to ask them. I would like you to not see the guy who... I don't even want to describe it. All right. I don't want you to see this guy, right? I don't want you to be friends with this guy because he hurt me. You can ask that. Of course you can. No, you're free to ask it. Now, they can say no, of course. But saying, you shouldn't ask me that. You can't dictate to me. Hey, I'm not dictating to you because I'm not Stalin. But I sure as hell can say, a condition of being friends with me is you not also be friends with the guy who assaulted me. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. I think that's a very reasonable request.
I think so too.
Right. Which means that if, quote, friends aren't responding reasonably to a reasonable request, well, they're not friends. And better you learn that now than later. I'm a Band-Aid off quick kind of guy. So you kind of want to get this lesson as soon as humanly possible, because otherwise the betrayals can escalate, right?
Yeah.
Look, your friends, and again, not to blame them, but in an ideal world, Sally, in an ideal world, your friends would say, okay, this guy's being a little bit weird. He's kind of aggressive. And she's really drunk. And she's probably going to sleep in his room. Let's just take her home.
Yeah.
I mean, your friends would not have... I mean, I assume that your friends weren't all as drunk as you were, right?
Probably not.
Right. So your friends could have said, you know, they're not boyfriend, girlfriend. She's going to end up in the room. He's being kind of hostile. He's weird. He's a bit of a aggressive drunk. 99% sure nothing's going to happen that's bad, but, you know, prevention is better than cure. Let's just take her home, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to assume that you got into this young man's bed without any sexual desire at all. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right. Right. A 19-year-old man is still more than half a decade away from intellectual maturity.
Mm.
They're kind of kids with hormones. Again, excuses nothing. I'm just saying that I'm not sure that women always fully understand the power and the waywardness of male sexuality, particularly when combined with alcohol. And the whole point of sexual morality in the past was to prevent these kinds of situations from coming into being, which again, justifies nothing that was done to you. You're still a victim. He was still absolutely wrong. But there was a reason why there were chaperones. There was a reason why people had to leave their doors open. There's a reason why an attractive single young man and young woman would not be allowed to go into the same bedroom blind drunk, right?
Yeah.
And it is horrible to see what happens when you ask people to take your side in a pretty clearly defined situation, right? Because they can say, oh, she's lying, or she's making it up, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But then they're saying, I was friends with someone who lies and makes things up and destroys a man's life because he wasn't nice to her. I'm not accusing you of that or whatever, but that's what they'd have to say in their heads, right? And that would prompt some...
I mean, like...
Go ahead.
I mean, I almost respect the people who have outright decided that they think I'm lying and have cut me off more than the people who are trying to toe the middle line.
Well, you know,
like,
they're not as much of a concern for you anymore, right? Because their position is clear,
yeah, of course
right?
Not. But it's just sort of like, okay, they think that I'm lying about this. Clearly, that makes me a horrible person in their minds. Of course, they're not going to want to spend time with me. But
well,
the people
and he's
who
probably been working the social network as well, right? With his side of the story.
Of course, yeah. But the people who are trying to like toe the middle line and remain friends with both of us and remain neutral in the situation, it's like, it's almost like, don't you care, like, the sort of company that you're keeping?
Well, I think the answer to that is pretty clear. That they don't.
Mm.
And they resent you probably for putting them in that situation where they have to choose. Now, This is something I was talking about years and years ago in the show, that if you have a really dysfunctional family and one person at the Thanksgiving table starts to bring up some of the dysfunction, grandfather used to beat me and whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who does everyone get mad at?
The person bringing it up.
Yeah. We were fine until you opened your big mouth and spoke the truth. It is a chilling thing when you realize how few people in this world have any relationship to integrity or morality. It's one of the reasons I work so hard to try and bring it to more and more people, because I have seen into this Nietzschean post-Darwinist hellscape of the will to power, where people don't have any objective standards with which to judge moral situations and make decisions accordingly. They have no objective standards. They're just trying to get by. They're just trying to not cause too many problems and not ruffle too many feathers. And they will just conform to whoever has the most power in a particular situation, which is usually the worst person.
Yeah.
And that is a grab your eyelids open situation, which you can't ever unsee, right?
Mm.
And I hope that at least it will give you some drive to say, the people with no spine can never stand with me. And to try and find people and have relationships with people who are honest with themselves. Who, you know, if they were hurt by their parents, they say, I was hurt by my parents. If they weren't, they don't, right? People who have gone through these kinds of trial by fires and have understood the spineless, betraying nature of the social environment in which we find ourselves in the 21st century, after a century and a half of leftism and socialism and Marxism and the welfare state and nihilism and the 70s, which I mentioned before. It wasn't just bad fashion. Polyester soul planet. So you can, now that you've seen these red flags, now that you have seen, you can go back and say, okay, what was the indication that these people were untrustworthy? What was the indication that they were going to take the easy route or betray me or whatever? And then look for those and rigorously and rigidly guide yourself to the right kinds of people by being constantly on the lookout for red flags.
Yeah.
Paranoia breeds protection. It sounds kind of weird, but you know what I mean? Like caution breeds, caution is better. And that's necessary. I mean, as a public figure as well, but I mean, it's just, you know, you gotta be on the high shelf. You gotta be top shelf. You've gotta be hard to crack, and people gotta really want it, and they gotta prove themselves to you. Otherwise, you end up, it's like those trust exercises, you know, you've probably done them in dance, we did them in theater, you know, you fall backwards and people catch you and it's like, no, they just drop you and then drop a brick on you. But now you know that you can find better people and your life can become far more secure in the long run than if this had never happened. And I'm a big one, Sally, for trying to milk as much gold out of terrible things as humanly possible. We can't make bad things good, but we can get as much good out of bad things as possible. And
Definitely.
that is the best that we can make out of evil occurrences. And sometimes it doesn't make them worthwhile, but it makes them as valuable as humanly possible.
Yeah, I have one friend and it like really, really scares me when he says stuff like this. But the girl who told me to stay friends with this guy after it happened, and like her and the other person who said that they wouldn't feel guilty if them cutting me off resulted in me trying to kill myself. He constantly goes on about how they're good people and how he trusts them ultimately, and
people are very honest. All we have to do, Sally, all we have to do is listen to them. You know, people say the most astonishing things directly to our faces. And then we like, I'm sure they're just talking, or it doesn't really matter. And, you know, let's go watch some videos or whatever. And then when we look back, we say, man, they really were telling me the truth about themselves, weren't they? People will tell you the most incredible things. All you have to do is listen and assume that they're telling the truth and make your decisions accordingly. That's how you stay safe. People tell you everything you need to know about them, usually in the first 5 minutes. Whether it's body language or statements or the topics that they choose and so on. They tell you everything you need to know about them in the first 5 minutes. And once you learn to read that and to understand that and to listen to that, then you get security. Then you get predictability. Then you get quality. But not until. So he's telling you the truth. He thinks these people who've betrayed you are good people, so screw him. We all want to engage. We want to change these people's mind. Don't you understand that they're bad? He's already told you everything about himself. He's not going to change. Not going to change. Assume no one changes. Assume no one changes and your life gets so simple. Assume no one changes. And everything's so much easier. You end up with a few very high quality relations if you assume no one changes. Assuming that people change has you go in there and try and tinker with everyone all the time, right? It wastes ungodly amounts of time and energy and doesn't change anyone anyway. Just assume no one's going to change. So much easier. Now, I know I do a show where people change and so on. Sure, if people are in motion, if someone says, man, I'm going to go to therapy, I got to figure this out. I had this big dream, I had this big revelation, and then they follow through and they this and they that. Okay, sure. But assume no one is going to become an Olympic athlete. I don't meet people and say, hey, go become an Olympic athlete. I think you should really become an Olympic athlete. You should really change everything and become an Olympic athlete. No one's going to become an Olympic athlete except the guy who, since the age of 5, has been training to become an Olympic athlete. And even then, he probably won't make it. So if somebody's already in the big process of self-knowledge and understanding, and they're moving and they're changing.
I mean, this guy who said...
I'm sorry?
This guy who said that he is in therapy, and he's really into like Jordan Peterson, and he wants to listen to this show after.
No, good. So being in therapy is not enough.
Yeah.
It's like saying, I'm going to become an Olympic athlete because I signed up for a personal trainer session. Great. That may be possibly the start. But here's the way you find out if somebody's really dedicated to therapy. Here's your little trick, Sally, going to save you years of your life. It's like I've just made everybody half immortal. Here we go. Here's my vampire bite of wisdom. If somebody says, I'm in therapy, great. Then you ask them, what do you do when you're not in therapy? What do you do about growth when you're not in therapy? Now, for me, I was in therapy 3 hours a week, and I spent at least 10 to 15 hours a week journaling and dream analysis and reading and sentence completion and, Nathaniel Branden workbooks and John Gray workbooks, you name it, right? Because the therapy was like, that was just opening a door. I'm the one who's got to walk through. So if the person's like, oh yeah, I go to therapy like an hour a week or whatever, and you say, well, what do you do outside of therapy? And they're like, no, I go to therapy. Like, well,
I mean, he does do all of this stuff. Like,
good. Okay, well then fantastic. If he's in motion, right?
Yeah.
But then the question is, when somebody makes a self-contradictory statement, or when somebody says something like, no, I think these are really good people, then you say, well, how do you know? And if they're like, wait a minute, actually, I don't really know. How do I know? Then they have the third eye. They can observe themselves. They can improve. But if they get defensive, or they attack, or they avoid, or then it's just like, you're not going to therapy. You're just looking at a diet book thinking that helps you lose weight.
Yeah, I get you.
I went to a personal trainer 1 hour last week and 1 hour this week. I'm ripped. It's like, no, you're not. Is that helpful?
Yeah, very.
Here's hoping I leave you feeling better.
Yeah, this has been very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, how you feel? I mean, this is an intense thing to talk about. How are you doing?
Sorry.
Oh, how are you feeling? It's an intense thing to talk about. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing all right.
All right. No cutting, right?
Yeah, better than before the call.
Better than before the call. I'll take that. All right. Well, do let me know how it goes, and please accept my sympathies for what happened to you. It is a terrible, untutored world that we live in, and we have to learn very hard lessons that were learned many years, many centuries sometimes before, but we have to do the great relearning, and some people mistake that for conservatism, as if we want to conserve much of what goes on in the world right now. But I really do appreciate everyone's call. I really do appreciate everyone's time, energy, attention, honesty, openness, and connection. Only connect, as E.M. Forster said. Please don't forget to pick up your copy of The Art of the Argument at theartoftheargument.com. You can help support the show. Really, really appreciate your help and support of the show. Very, very necessary. At freedomainradio.com/donate. You can follow me on Twitter at Stefan Molyneux and sign up for a newsletter at freedomainradio.com. Last but not least, if you've got some shopping to do, you can do that at fdrurl.com/Amazon. Thank you, my lovelies. I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.